Phantasmagoria Canto v. Byckerment. Lewis Carroll Quo. Don't they consult the victims, though? Quo. I said. Quo. They should, by rights, give them a chance, because, you know, the tastes of people differ so, especially in sprites. Quo. The phantom shook his head and smiled. Quo. Consult them? Not a bit. 'Twould be a job to drive one wild, to satisfy one single child, there'd be no end to it. Quo. Quo. Of course you can't leave children free, Quo. Said I, Quo. To pick and choose, but, in the case of men like me, I think mine host might fairly be allowed to state his views. Quo. He said, and quo. It really wouldn't pay, folk are so full of fancies. We visit for a single day, and whether then we go, or stay, depends on circumstances. Quo. And, though we don't consult mine host before the thing's arranged, still, if he often quits his post, or is not a well-mannered ghost, then you can have him changed. Quo. But if the host's a man like you, I mean a man of sense. And if the house is not too new, Quo. Quo. Why, what has that, Quo, said I, Quo, to do with ghost convenience? Quo. Quo. A new house does not suit, you know, it's such a job to trim it, but, after 20 years or so, the wainscotings begin to go, so 20 is the limit. Quo. Quo. To trim and quo was not a phrase I could remember having heard. Quo. Perhaps, quo. I said, quo. You'll be so good as tell me what is understood exactly by that word? Quo. Quo. It means the loosening all the doors. Quo. The ghost replied, and laughed. Quo. It means the drilling holes by scores in all the skirting boards and floors, to make a thorough draft. Quo. You'll sometimes find that one or two are all you really need to let the wind come whistling through, but here there'll be a lot to do. Quo. I faintly gasped and quo. Indeed. Quo. If I'd been rather later, I'll be bound. Quo. I added, trying, most unsuccessfully, to smile. Quo. You'd have been busy all this while, trimming and beautifying. Quo. Quo. Why, no, quo, said he. Quo. Perhaps I should have stayed another minute, but still no ghost, that's any good, without an introduction would have ventured to begin it. Quo. The proper thing, as you were late, was certainly to go, but, with the roads in such a state, I got the night mayor's leave to wait for half an hour or so. Quo. Quo. Who's the night mayor? Quo. I cried. Instead of answering my question, Quo. Well, if you don't know that, Quo, he said, Quo. Either you never go to bed, or you've a grand digestion. Quo. He goes about and sits on folk that eat too much at night. His duties are to pinch, and poke, and squeeze them till they nearly choke. Quo. I said, and quo. It serves them right. Quo. Quo. And folk who sup on things like these, quo. He muttered, quo. Eggs and bacon, lobster, and duck, and toasted cheese. If they don't get an awful squeeze, I'm very much mistaken. Quo. He is immensely fat, and so well suits the occupation. In point of fact, if you must know, we used to call him years ago, the mayor in corporation. Quo. The day he was elected mayor I know that every sprite meant to vote for me, but did not dare, he was so frantic with despair and furious with excitement. Quo. When it was over, for a whim, he ran to tell the king. And being the reverse of slim, a 2-mile trot was not for him a very easy thing. Quo. So, to reward him for his run, as it was baking hot, and he was over 20 stone, the king proceeded, half in fun, to knight him on the spot. Quo. 'Twas a great liberty to take. Quo. I fired up like a rocket. Quo. He did it just for punning's sake. The man, says Johnson, that would make a pun, would pick a pocket. Quo. Quo. A man, quo, said he, quo, is not a king. Quo. I argued for a while, and did my best to prove the thing, the phantom merely listening with a contemptuous smile. At last, when, breath and patience spent, I had recourse to smoking, quo. Your aim, quo, he said, quo, is excellent, but, when you call it argument, of course you're only joking? Quo. Stung by his cold and snaky eye, I roused myself at length to say quo. At least I do defy the veriest sceptic to deny that union is strength. Quo. Quo. That's true enough, quo, said he, quo. Yet stay, quo. I listened in all meanness, quo. Union is strength, I'm bound to say. In fact, the thing's as clear as day. But onions are a weakness. Quo.